Right now in the world, it's a complete lockdown. Due to the virus that YouTube won't allow you to talk about, it has meant that everyone in the world has been asked to stay at home. Luckily, at this time, the UK has been given a gift for this time of isolation. The Disney overlords up on high have finally brought out Disney Plus in the UK. Now this has a whole load of films and TV programs, and it is clearly just one big flex from Disney that's showing us that they own a lot of the things that we love and that they're going to be milking every single franchise dry.
Oh, you little... I got you!
Stop! He's already dead.
Wait a minute, they even own The Simpsons? I think this video is just one giant Disney ad. Hey Disney, call me up. I'm happy to get paid in Disney merchandise. I gotta have me that goofy Darth Vader figure.
Gosh.
Anyways, let's get back on track. With Disney Plus being available in the UK now, it's given me the chance to rewatch the Marvel Cinematic Universe. For those that have been living in isolation for the last 12 years, the Marvel Cinematic Universe, known as the MCU, is a collection of movies made by Marvel Studios based on different superheroes from the Marvel comics. As of recording, 23 films have been released, earning over £18.5 billion worldwide. These stories, known as the Infinity Saga, has shown the growth of the Avengers and the story of a big purple man, Thanos, and the Infinity Stones. The MCU is still continually growing, especially with the potential to include big names such as Spider-Man, the X-Men, and the Fantastic Four. Several films and TV shows have been made showing the MCU is nowhere near stopping just yet.
Hey,
What? Who's that?
get on with a stinking review.
What?
Get on with the review. People haven't come here for a history lesson. They want to know if you like the movie.
Ah yes, sorry, slightly lost track there. In this video, we're going to look at the first film that would kick off the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Iron Man. If I had to describe this film in one word, it would be ballsy. It came out in 2008, and at this time Marvel Studios hadn't made any films whatsoever. The people in charge of producing this film included Kevin Feige, and he had only ever been a part of other Marvel products such as the Raimi Spider-Man trilogy and the X-Men and Fantastic Four films. And so this was their first chance to create a film by themselves without other studios having the main say in what would happen. From the start, they were always planning on creating a huge universe of films similar to comic crossovers, but all of it would ride on the success of their first few films. And so, Marvel decided to bring out the big gun. Iron Man. Okay. See, that sentence makes sense now, but back then Iron Man wasn't the popular character that he is. So they took a huge gamble on having an Iron Man movie. And it totally paid off. This film is brilliant at showing a likeable character with questionable qualities and morals becoming a superhero.
That would be outlandish.
Okay. Well, maybe not a superhero, but at least a better man. It's a film that takes so many risks and ends up pulling them off. Even the director was a risk. They brought in this guy called Jon Favreau, and in the past he had a few successes within acting and directing, but at the time his most well-known film would have been Elf. And let's just say, if I was wanting a director for an Iron Man film, I would not be thinking of the guy that made a cult Christmas film. So yeah, they took a risk with going with Jon Favreau, and yet he's the guy to thank for all the amazing ideas that we see throughout this film, as well as the amazing actors brought in to portray these characters. Speaking of which,
Tony Stark makes you feel he's a cool exec with a heart of steel.
there's a reason why Robert Downey Jr. is as big as he is today, and it's all thanks to this role. Years before becoming Iron Man, Robert Downey Jr. was sent to rehab for a year due to drug issues, and in 2003 he had actually quit drugs for good, but this had a major effect on his acting career. After that, he had a few appearances in some films, but no real major success, until the role of Tony Stark was offered to him by Jon Favreau. It's almost poetic, seeing Downey take on the role of a man who in the comics had similar addiction issues but wanted to make up for the mistakes he had made in the past. Now, to really look at this character through the story and how Robert Downey Jr. portrays it, I want to talk to you about the first act of this film in a little more detail. When we look at the opening scene of the film, we see the type of person Tony Stark is and how he can control a room, or in this case, a heavily protected vehicle. The men and women protecting him go from feeling intimidated to relaxed after just a few lines from Stark. Then only after 3 minutes of the film being started, we're already kicking into the action, with Tony getting captured by what seems to be the antagonists of the film. As he gets flung out of the vehicle onto the floor, the final thing he sees before bleeding to death is his own Stark Industries bomb. Anyway, seeing that bomb creates an interesting theme of his own technology being his demise in this film. The thing destroying his life is the weaponry he's created. It's pointed out to us later in the film by the reporter, but it really only dawns on Tony once it blows up in his face. We cut back to 36 hours earlier, with Tony in Las Vegas and his playboy persona is showing throughout, gambling and hooking up with the reporter interviewing him. We know that these qualities aren't good, but that's the point of Tony Stark, and Downey embodies this persona, and just like he makes others around him love him, us as an audience also seem to love him too. Later on, we see the reason Tony has gone to the Middle East as part of a weapons showcase for the new Jericho missile. We then see a seriously cool shot of Tony as the missiles explode behind him. After being brought back up to speed, we then start to realise what has happened to Tony. He's been taken hostage by a group known as the Ten Rings in reference to the Mandarin, something we see later down the line in a future film and may even see further down the line in a new Marvel film. In the next scene, Tony ends up waking up and realising that he is hooked up to a car battery. We then meet Yinsen, who helps Tony Stark to try and escape using the Iron Man. After building an arc reactor to protect his heart, he then creates the Iron Man suit. Once it has been built, we have a great scene of him ploughing down people around him and definitely providing some serious overkill before flying off, exploding everything around him. Then after crash landing in the desert, by some miracle, Tony seems to be found by his pal and gets flown back to America to have a press conference. Obviously after a cheeseburger first. Good product placement there, by the way. Even somehow gets referenced in Endgame again.
What do you want?
Cheeseburgers.
You know, your dad liked cheeseburgers.
Okay.
I'm gonna get you all the cheeseburgers you want.
Okay.
In this press conference, we see Tony in the midst of a revelation, his weapons causing a greater destruction in the world than he realised. And so, he decides...
Effective immediately, I am shutting down the weapons manufacturer division of Stark International.
Now, in terms of character development, you may be wondering, how did he get here? And that's where we have to rewind back to those scenes in the cave. If I were to ask you who's the most important character in the MCU, there would be plenty of different answers. Some would say Iron Man because of the snap. Some would say Doctor Strange for masterminding all of Infinity War and Endgame. And some would say Baby Groot because he's just super adorable, if a bit dated now.
Baby Yoda.
They're all pretty fair arguments, but one huge argument which I'm posing now is that the most important character in the MCU is this guy. Now some of you are like,
Wait a minute! Who are you?
and you're right in thinking that. Even Tony thought that, and he had met the guy before.
We met once, you know, at a technical conference in Bern.
Don't remember.
No, you wouldn't. If I had been that drunk, I wouldn't have been able to stand, much less give a lecture on integrated circuits.
Now, it's really important to note that without this guy, there wouldn't be this guy. The reason he is the most important character is because of how much an impact he has to the growth of Tony Stark, and the reason Tony decides to become a better person. As I've said before, we first see Tony in these scenes connected to a car battery. Now, first of all, the irony shown, intentional or not, is brilliant in this image that we see. The man who has made a living creating the most advanced tech in the world is now only living because of a basic car battery. As I said, intentional or not, that is great. But secondly, it's great to see that Yinsen has physically saved Tony with this basic battery, because we're also about to see how Yinsen ends up saving Tony's character. After Tony finds out he's been kept alive to create a Jericho missile, and that if he doesn't he will be executed, he begins to give up. That is until we see another great scene where Yinsen reassures and inspires Tony by talking to him about his legacy.
That is your legacy, Stark. Your life's work in the hands of those murderers. Is that how you want to go out? Is this the last act of defiance of the great Tony Stark? Or are you going to do something about it?
Do anything. They're gonna kill me. You. Either way, and if they don't, I'll probably be dead in a week.
Well then, this is a very important week for you, isn't it?
He is then inspired and so begins to build the arc reactor to power his heart. But not only that, to also power the Iron Man. As Tony and Yinsen begin to talk during a game of backgammon, Tony asks,
Got a family?
Yes. And I will see them when I leave here.
very optimistic. Except, it's not.
Stop.
Come on. We gotta go. Move for me. Come on, we got a plan. We're gonna stick to it.
This was always the plan, Stark.
Come on, you gotta go see your family. Get up.
My family's dead. I'm going to see them now, Stark.
As we can see, Tony's response is one of gratitude. This man has literally saved his life. Also in this backgammon scene, Yinsen asks if Tony has a family, with which he replies,
No. So you're a man who has everything and nothing.
This quote is calling out Tony for his material lifestyle and calling into question once again his legacy. These lines are also great because they soon become words that Tony no longer wants to live by once he gets back to America. Instead, he wants to try and find somebody that loves him so that he can have that thing that Yinsen was talking about. We come back to Yinsen's last words to Tony in the cave.
Don't waste it. Don't waste your life.
You can see in Downey's brilliant acting, something snaps within the character of Tony. These are now his words to live by.
Don't waste it. Don't waste your life.
And with the privilege of hindsight, we can now safely say that Tony is going to start a new legacy. One that has not come because of his weapons or his playboy lifestyle, but from doing good for the world. All thanks to Yinsen, the most important character in the MCU. And so because of the amazing script and the acting and directing behind it, we can honestly see the natural change between a guy that does this
Be prepared to lose a few with you.
to a guy that does this.
I am shutting down the weapons manufacturer division of Stark International.
However, once Tony has stopped all the weapon productions, the film starts to reveal who the true baddie is. Let's be honest, Jeff Bridges is a mediocre villain. You can't say anything, Ant-Man. I mean, he's pretty menacing. I understand some of his motives. He is a businessman after all, which is why he's doing some of the things he's doing. But when you actually stop to think about it, some of his actions aren't explained at all.
Go on, here, you can have a piece.
Thank you.
I mean, why would he do that?
Pizza time, pizza time, pizza time.
Okay, we can let him off for the pizza thing. Seriously, why does Jeff Bridges' character want to kill Tony in the first place? Has he done something wrong? Has he stopped creating these amazing inventions, making Stark Industries the profitable company that it is?
I don't think so.
So why does he want him killed?
Tell us that the target you paid us to kill was the great Tony Stark.
It's a minor plot hole at first, but it sort of speaks into Jeff Bridges' character. You're not really sure what his intentions are, and why he might be doing something. It's weird that he tells Tony that he's betrayed him, but doesn't do anything about it until much later. He allows Pepper to retrieve documents that are going to expose him, even though he knows that she has them. What is he even going to do with the suit anyways once he's won? Sell them? I mean, if Tony and Pepper are dead, surely someone, maybe Tony's best friend Rhodey, who Jeff Bridges is gonna sell this suit to anyways, can put two and two together and can realise that Jeff Bridges might have something to do with the killings? I don't know, maybe I'm thinking too much into it. But that's because the movie hasn't really done that for you. Just a quick side note, one thing I realised whilst watching this film was how each villain in the Iron Man movies actually represents a part of Tony's past life / character that he has to overcome. In this film, it's the past of selling weapons and being in business, which we see in the form of Jeff Bridges. Iron Man 2 talks about Tony looking past the failures of his dad, and we see that personified through Whiplash.
I want my board.
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
A product of Tony's dad's disagreement with Whiplash's father. And finally, in Iron Man 3, we see Aldrich Killian.
I am the Mandarin!
As the symbol of Tony's previous playboy lifestyle, and thinking only of himself and not of the people surrounding him, or the consequences of his actions. It is extremely clever how throughout these three films, thematically Tony is always in some way fighting with a part of himself, something that he needs to improve on. And we see by the end of Iron Man 3 that these three villains have helped him to grow and become a better person. But we're slightly getting ahead of ourselves now, so I'm just going to try and slowly bring it back to the main point.
You didn't see anything.
At the end of this movie, Jeff Bridges has developed a new Ironmonger suit made out of the remnants of Tony's first suit back in the cave, now powered by Tony's arc reactor that Jeff Bridges has stolen out of his chest. This then kicks us off into our final conflict, and what would be the start of a problem within superhero movies that I'd like to call the evil twin dilemma. There's a reason why a lot of the MCU films are compared to this first Iron Man film, and it's mostly because of the evil twin dilemma. The evil twin dilemma is something a lot of Marvel films seem to have. When making their movie, it seems that the villains of those movies end up being evil versions of the good guys. For example, Hulk and the Abomination.
Hulk! Smash!
Black Panther and Killmonger.
This is it for you, cousin.
Doctor Strange and this guy. Let me just Google search for his name. Kai Kilius? Okay, Doctor Strange and Kai Kilius.
You don't know how to use that, do you?
Oh, and don't think we've forgotten about you, Ant-Man. Now, I'm not saying these villains are all bad. Some are characterized really well, but those come few and far between in the MCU. And with Iron Man, it's not an exception. As I've said already, Jeff Bridges is a pretty mediocre villain, and the final showdown just caps off how mediocre he really is. We first see Ironmonger trying to kill Pepper Potts, but before he can kill her, Tony comes in to save the day, and a pretty good fight ensues, to be honest, which ends up leading them both flying up into the sky.
You've upgraded your armor. I've made some upgrades of my own.
Sir, it appears that
They fly now!
they fly now.
They fly now!
Now, this scene may seem confusing at first, until you remember a previous scene where Tony realised that there was a problem with ice if he flew up too high, and so as Tony flies up, the Ironmonger still thinks he's won until Tony says,
How'd you solve the icing problem?
Icing problem.
Might want to look into it.
It's a pretty good callback, and it just shows that the majority of these scenes in some way either move the story forward or get called back in the end. So there we are, Ironmonger's fallen from the sky, and that should be it, right? Wrong. Ironmonger seems to have survived falling and begins to crush Tony. It seems the only way to kill the Ironmonger is through a huge blast of electricity. Kinda lucky then that they're on top of the building with a giant arc reactor in it. Seems a bit too lucky. And so Pepper overloads the reactor, which somehow pushes Tony to the side and yet kills Jeff Bridges in the process.
That doesn't make sense.
So in terms of final acts, this isn't the greatest you will ever see, but it's not meant to be. You know, it's supposed to be small stakes, and in a way that's kind of refreshing, especially after quite a few films of having the end of the universe threat. Watching something that has such a small scale is actually quite a nice change of scenery. However, that does come at a price, as it's not as exciting. At the end of the day, you're seeing two robots with similar powers fight each other until one overloads and the other survives through sheer luck. And that's it. That's the final battle. Tony survives, and the next day he is seen to be taking an interview to make sure he protects his identity. Now, I really like this final scene for several reasons, but mostly because we continue to see that Tony still has a bit of ego about him.
It is one thing to question the official story and another thing entirely to make wild accusations or insinuate that I'm a superhero.
I never said you were a superhero.
Didn't?
Mm-mm.
Well, good, because that would be outlandish and fantastic.
And that's perfect because his character is just like that. He doesn't need to completely change by the end of this film. He's still the same guy, but just with a new purpose. And so as he's about to continue, instead of pretending to be somebody he isn't, he decides to utter the 4 famous words that would start the franchise.
I am Iron Man.
Chills. And the AC/DC riff playing in. Oof. What a great way to end a very good origin story. Now you may be wondering, how come you haven't mentioned any other characters? To be honest, it's because I didn't see them as major characters within this film, at least compared to Tony, Yinsen, and Ironmonger. So, what I'll do is I'll quickly tell you my thoughts on these other characters in under 30 seconds. Timer on the screen. Let's go. Pepper Potts, good love interest. You can buy the chemistry between her and Tony. Glad they don't just kiss at the end, gives anticipation for their romance to continue in the sequel. Rhodey, Terrence Howard is okay at the role, no much is given to him at this point as he isn't a War Machine yet. It's obviously a mistake that Howard didn't want to continue with the character, but I like Don Cheadle and his portrayal of Rhodey/War Machine. Happy Hogan doesn't do much in this story, so glad Jon Favreau gets bigger roles in future stories, almost thanking him for the work he did starting off this universe. Agent Coulson does well to set up the teaser of S.H.I.E.L.D. for the fans, especially for those who didn't get to see Nick Fury at the end. Speaking of Nick Fury, It's so funny to think of a time in Marvel movies where people wouldn't stay behind to watch an after-credits scene. Sure, it had been done before in previous movies, such as Ferris Bueller's Day Off, but I bet very few people stayed behind to wait after Iron Man's credits. But man, to see Samuel L. Jackson talking about the Avengers Initiative, I bet that excited a lot of fans back in the day. Also, recently there's been a clip released showing that they had shot another scene of Nick Fury talking about Spider-Man and the X-Men.
As if gamma accidents, radioactive bug bites, and assorted mutants weren't enough.
I mean, imagine if that had happened back in 2008. Imagine the world we would live in now. Granted, it's pretty much what we've got now with the MCU, but the combinations we could have seen earlier, some we won't even get to see now. Wolverine with Captain America, Spider-Man with Deadpool, make it happen Marvel, Iron Man and... Magneto? I don't know. The possibilities though would be endless. However, that line about the Avengers Initiative is still a great way to excite the fans about the future of this franchise. So, how would I rate this film? Well, the first 2 acts of this film are great. The character development of Tony is done superbly through the script and especially through Robert Downey's portrayal. And so this first film was able to create a firm foundation for one of the most important characters in the MCU, besides Yinsen. The humour throughout is brilliant and not as forced as maybe some superhero films. However, the final act and villain fall victim to the evil twin dilemma, which Marvel will suffer from in a few movies. But all in all, this is a brilliant movie, with CGI that has stood the test of time, and an origin story that is still exciting to watch, even after the extravaganza that was Avengers Endgame. I would definitely recommend this to anyone excited by superhero movies or even action movies to definitely give it a watch, especially if they haven't already. I guarantee they would fall in love with it, just like I did 12 years ago, and still do to this day. I'm going to give Iron Man 1 an 8 out of 10. Thanks for watching my first video on this channel. Let me know down below in the comments what you thought of this video, as well as any films that you think I should make a video on. And if you did enjoy watching, feel free to like the video or even subscribe to my channel. Why, you may ask? Well, I'm planning to make videos on each of the other MCU movies in order as well, so subscribe to be able to see when the new video comes out. As of this moment though, I'm thinking of skipping The Incredible Hulk, as it's one that I think most people won't care too much about. There'll be a poll in the right hand corner, so just vote on that whether or not you actually want to see that video or not. If there's also a lot of support down in the comments wanting me to do that review, then I will consider making one. Anyways, thank you all for watching. Make sure to stay safe out there in these tough times. I'll hopefully see you in the next video. Bye!